On December 31st, 2018, Lindsay Ellis made a video on Death of the Author, and the first time I watched it, I was confused. I thought that she had gotten it all wrong, but since I've seen it many times, periodically, like once a year, but I've seen it like 6 times now, and every time I arrive to a different conclusion, to a different point that I would want to make. In one of those occasions, I thought about paratext and how if there is no paratext, then like Death of the Author and the way that Lindsay explains it can actually happen. And in another, I thought about if we have a personality driven culture, if personal brand is so like so visible and so important, then we can be fans of writers whose books we have not read yet, right? That was the case for me for a long time. Since my teens, I wanted to read Garcia Marquez or Vargas Llosa, but I was still not in the age to read them and appreciate them. I was only able to read them last year, but I had already listened to their interviews and I knew of their life beforehand, and that was what motivated me to read their stuff in the first place. Going back to her video, the framework of the video is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, but the pertinent issue is J.K. Rowling and her platform as an now open turf. And it was until the last time that I read or reread the Death of the Author essay, which is something that I've also revisited several times throughout the years, and that I watched Lindsay's video, that I understood that Barthes and Lindsay are arguing different things. Barthes argues about and against authorial intent, and Lindsay argues about authorial ownership, if that makes sense. She doesn't advocate for it. She says it is what it is, although it kind of sucks. She makes grand statements about personal brand, author influence, paratext, human nature, if that even exists. And that's fine and all, and for the most part correct. But Barthes is arguing about interpretation and how it operates between author and reader. He says in the essay that by assigning an author to a text, we are limiting its meaning, and we should allow the meanings of a text to go beyond what the author provides or confides in us. That's what separating art from the artist is. It's allowing multiple interpretations to come out of a text instead of letting the author monopolize it. However, at no point in the essay does Barthes say that we should avoid thinking or learning about the author, nor does he say that in Le Plaisir du Texte or in the interviews that Lindsay uses as footage for her video. If he has said that, I would like to know. But the author is still here. It's just that after the text has been written, he becomes a spectator just like you and me. The author is still here, they just don't own the meaning of the text, which is why I find it so odd that John would confess the following.
The idea of Death of the Author kind of stemmed partially from this culture that was very absolute, and Barthes kind of wanted to kill absolutes, but in return it kind of created a different absolute.
I used to believe that the author should disappear insofar as possible from the text, and that the responsibility of the reader was to read the text and never think about the author. You know, like, I had this period in high school where I read everything in the context of the author, and then I had this long period of maybe 10 or 15 years where I tried to read nothing in the context of the author.
Because that was never the point. Death of the Author is not about negating the author or chasing after a pure reading of a text. Barthes was arguing that the author had been prioritized long enough, and that it was time that the reader was prioritized. And I don't even agree about authorial ownership perpetuated by personal brand in a capitalist society. Does Taylor Swift really own her own songs after Scooter Braun sold the master rights to her first 6 albums? Would she be obligated to re-record her music if that were the case? What Lindsay says on her video is all correct because it is about J.K. Rowling. In fact, the sequel to that video is exclusively about J.K. Rowling. And the moral conundrum, it's not about the interpretation aspect of Death of the Author, right? And because separating the art from the artist became an ethical problem, which, you know, I have my own views on. I don't think they're important right now. I mean, we can talk about that all day in a separate video. To summarize how I feel about that, I think that there is the artist and there is the person. Like the person is not the artist at all times, although the person is always present in the artist. So to me, it's not about separating the art from the artist. It's separating the person from the artist, or the artist from the person. I don't know how you feel about that. That is just what I feel. And regarding Harry Potter, without again going too deep into it, I think that even if Lindsay says that she doesn't have answers about this, stopping the consumption of Harry Potter media like as extreme, but because she and we can also understand that it means like definitely like to not support any more movies, games, any more books related to the wizarding world, or even like the wizarding world existing. Like it all contributes to her wealth and influence and etc. Like yes, the solution is extreme and therefore it does not seem viable. But like that is what should happen for Rowling to lose her power and therefore not be such a menace to the public perception of trans people. I agree to that, and personally I wouldn't mind doing that. It's been years since I read the books. I still own them. I mean, I saw Fantastic Beasts 2. It tanked, I think. So there's that. But I mean, I would be up to like stopping Harry Potter consumption, because I mean, yeah, I think it would be more important to, you know, for the cause. Even though, yeah, Harry Potter was also a part of my childhood and etc. And I also still like the movies and still like the books. And even despite like analysis and conversations about certain themes and story elements, like Rita Skeeter or lycanthropy being an allegory for homosexuality by extension, because it's more of it's an AIDS analogy, and therefore it for me does not sour the books, the stories. It makes them more interesting to like be able to discuss that. Like I prefer that these conversations are encouraged. So regarding J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, the moral question, I fundamentally agree with everything that Lindsay says. I just wanted to, you know, make this little response to address the arguments of the original essay, because any time that I wanted to like talk about the essay, I kept getting derailed, because everything came back again to like living authors. The essay, for example, mentions Valéry, Balzac, Mallarmé, people from the 19th century, and Barthes was from the 20th century. It it all changes, right? When we apply this to like living authors with a different problem. Like this is no longer about interpretation. And again, I recognize that it is more important, more pragmatic to think about the moral question rather than the like fun stuff of just like interpretation, like my readings, anybody's readings, etc. But I thought it was intriguing nevertheless. If you watched Lindsay's video and you were intrigued by what Barthes or Foucault had to say, I encourage you to read Barthes' essay. It is very accessible, even if you don't know like the authors that he's referencing. It's, I think, very understandable, and because it's short, you can also read it several times if you need it. Foucault's Qu'est-ce qu'un auteur? It's a lecture, so it is longer and definitely not as accessible. It does not even limit itself to like literary theory. The lecture is on literary theory, but it does not limit itself to fiction, right? He talks about Marx and Nietzsche and authors within the system of discursive practices. When Lindsay says that for Michel, everything, the author is like someone who participates in the discourse, it's a bit misleading because there is no one discourse. It's the opposite in any case. There are multiple discourses and they clash and they overlap. The lecture was written after Foucault published The Order of Things, which is the book that introduced that concept of discourse, like everything is discourse. So like it also references that. If you lack certain references, then you might have a tough time reading it, but I would still recommend it. Again, it's not only about like authorial intent, it's more about, for example, it asks like if an author is someone who has an oeuvre, okay, then what is an oeuvre? What counts as work of an author? Like everything they ever wrote on a page, the blank papers that Ramon Lopez Velarde had in his pockets the day that he died, do those also count as his oeuvre? That sort of thing is what is discussed in that lecture. So the salient quotes that look so easy to refute in Lindsay's video are sort of taken out of context. So if you want the broader context, then check it out. And because again, it does touch on themes that I think are very recognizable. For example, that quote about like the thing that once provided immortality now allowed to be its author's murderer, right? That is in a paragraph about the relationship between writing and death, and for example how in Greek epics the hero that sacrificed himself and therefore died young was granted that like legendary immortality, and or like how Sherazad in the 1001 Nights told stories, one each night, to avoid being executed by her husband, right? It's that sort of discussion, it's that sort of thing. Right after that quote, Foucault mentions Flaubert, Kafka, Proust, and the point that he's making is that writers are not inserting themselves into the text as they used to. And again, if you feel like that can be refuted, then excellent. I suggest that you really read it to know what to think about it. So I guess the point of this video was only to give some context, clear up some things, clear up some misconceptions. I guess that was also the purpose of my video on PhilosophyTube. And I might make more PhilosophyTube content soon. If you would like that, then hit the bell, hit like, I don't know, leave a comment. I don't. I'll do it anyway. Like even if you don't. Yeah. Bye. They don't own the meaning of a text.